Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, President Trump ruling out tariff cuts for China as trade negotiations are starting soon between the two countries. What he's expecting to get from the talks and what tasks he's giving to his new ambassador to China, Iris Tao at the White House. Think you're ready to fly? A major ID change kicks in today, and you might already have what you need without knowing it. Christina Corona speaks with travelers at LAX airport about real ID requirements. India says it targeted terrorists in Pakistan in an airstrike that killed 26 people. Pakistan threatens retaliation, saying civilians were killed. International leaders call for de-escalation between the nuclear-armed neighbors. Malcolm Hudson has the latest. An Israeli airstrike reportedly hit near a market in the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, Israel says they're going to demolish some homes in the West Bank for security reasons. Jason Perry reports. Communist leaders from China, Cuba, and Venezuela are in Moscow. Russia is asking Ukraine to stop its attacks on the capital city. Ariane Pazdar has more on Russia's request. In the Sistine Chapel, cardinals did not elect a new pope on the first day of the conclave. They'll have to continue the secretive vote tomorrow in a process that could take days or longer.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. President Trump digs in on high China tariffs ahead of this weekend's negotiations. He also swears in David Perdue as his new envoy to Beijing, tasking him with handling what he calls one of America's most complex and consequential foreign relationships. NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao has more.
Are you open to pulling back your tariffs in order to get China to the negotiating table?
No.
And President Trump rejecting any pullback on his 145% tariffs on China to jumpstart trade negotiations with Beijing. The hardline stance comes just 3 days before Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is set to meet with his Chinese counterparts in Switzerland for the first high-level talks between U.S. and China amid high-end tariffs. And despite the upcoming meeting, the U.S. and China continue to clash over narratives. While China says it was the U.S. who requested the meeting, President Trump says
they said we initiated. Well, I think they ought to go back and study their files.
The president has repeatedly suggested that China wants a deal badly, as its economy is decimated by his high tariffs. On what he's expecting from this weekend's meeting, Trump suggests he wants to fundamentally change the trade dynamic between the two countries.
What do you hope to come out of it?
We'll see. I mean, look, it's we were losing $1 trillion a year. Now we're not losing anything.
I'm glad to be your man in China. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Amid trade tensions, President Trump on Wednesday sworn in his new ambassador to China, former U.S. Senator from Georgia, David Perdue.
David will work to promote American interests and stability in the Indo-Pacific, seek fairness and reciprocity for the American worker.
Perdue, who served on the Foreign Relations Committee, has been an outspoken critic of the Chinese Communist Party. During his confirmation hearing last month, he said American buyers should stand up to China's unfair trade practices, which could deal a heavy blow to Beijing.
It's a different war, and they described it to us in the book called Unrestricted Warfare. The way forward is for the United States to become informed about that and to stand up to the challenge. That means that sometimes we'll have to sacrifice, Senator, because what we've been seduced by are the cheap prices that we gave into over the last 30 years coming out of China.
If we stop buying their product, what will happen?
Well,
the American public says enough's enough, what will happen to their economy?
It'll collapse.
And in other news, the president on Wednesday signed a proclamation designating Thursday, or May 8th, as the day for the U.S. to celebrate its victory in World War II. He says it's time for the U.S. to start taking credit for its achievements. Reporting from the White House, Iris Tao, NTD News.
As U.S.-China trade talks are officially around the corner, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent testifies before Congress, providing updates on the current and future outlook of economic relations with China. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has the details.
Later this week, as Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer meet Chinese officials in Switzerland, tariffs between the two countries remain historically high. The Chinese Communist Party apparently going back on their word that they would not begin trade talks until the U.S. removes its tariffs. This could be the first step in de-escalation. And earlier Wednesday, Bessent updated the House Financial Services Committee on the state of the international economy. Much of the hearing centered around China.
The Treasury has repeatedly sanctioned so-called Chinese teapot refiners, who are very large buyers of Iranian oil, which allows the regime to finance its terror proxies, not just in the Middle East, but all around the world.
Correct. Last week, the Trump administration ended a trade policy that it said allowed for cheap goods from China to flow into the U.S. and at the same time smuggle drugs like fentanyl into the country. That's the now defunct de minimis exemption, which allowed goods valued at $800 or less to enter the U.S. tax-free.
Some 4 million packages a day were coming to the United States. Now, as a result of that, what happened is it contributed to the fentanyl issue that we had because we did not look at these packages with the same viewpoint that others did.
The Chinese provide precursor drugs that are then converted into fentanyl by the Mexican cartels. And just today, I signed an order that will be made public within the next few days, identifying Chinese entities who are engaged in the fentanyl trade.
The U.S. currently has a 145% tariff on China, and China a 125% tariff on the U.S. Secretary Bessent previously called these high tariffs equivalent to a trade embargo. That's as the goal of these talks with China could be to de-escalate rather than to decouple. Reporting by Jack Bradley, NTD News.
The Federal Reserve is keeping its key interest rate unchanged. The central bank held off on lowering borrowing costs today as President Trump pushes for a rate cut. Fed Chair Jerome Powell had this to say.
The tariff increases announced so far have been significantly larger than anticipated. All of these policies are still evolving, however, and their effects on the economy remain highly uncertain. As economic conditions evolve, we'll continue to determine the appropriate stance of monetary policy based on the incoming data, the outlook, and the balance of risks. If the large increases in tariffs that have been announced are sustained, they're likely to generate a rise in inflation, a slowdown in economic growth, and an increase in unemployment. Despite heightened uncertainty, the economy is still in a solid position. The unemployment rate remains low, and the labor market is at or near maximum employment. Inflation has come down a great deal, but has been running somewhat above our 2% longer-run objective. In support of our goals, today the Federal Open Market Committee decided to leave our policy interest rate unchanged. The risks of higher unemployment and higher inflation appear to have risen, and we believe that the current stance of monetary policy leaves us well positioned to respond in a timely way to potential economic developments.
The Fed kept its rate at 4.3% for its third straight meeting after cutting it 3 times in a row at the end of last year. Trump's sweeping tariffs are shaking up the global economy, and uncertainty is giving the central bank pause. The Fed's mandate is to keep prices stable and maximize employment. Typically, when inflation rises, the Fed raises rates to slow borrowing and spending and cool inflation. If unemployment rises, the central bank usually reduces rates to spur more spending and growth. Today marks a major shift for U.S. air travelers. Adults flying domestically must now present a real ID or a federally accepted alternative at TSA checkpoints. NTD's Christina Corona tells us more from Los Angeles.
After a 20-year delay, real IDs are now required to fly domestically in the U.S. We're here at LAX, where travelers must now show a real ID driver's license or a TSA-approved alternative like a passport to get through security. Many travelers tell me they're already prepared.
I got it a while ago, maybe like 4 or 5 years ago.
I got it about 2 years ago.
Despite the new requirement, TSA lines weren't especially crowded, and travelers didn't report major issues for those who didn't have a real ID.
It was very smooth this morning. No lines, no problems.
The lines were a bit shorter, for sure, and it's pretty fast. You know, they just check it, and like if nothing happened. Doesn't even think like there was much of a difference.
Real IDs will also be required to enter federal facilities like military bases and courthouses. If you're unsure whether you have one, check for a star or symbol like the California bear on your license. Some people received it automatically when they last renewed.
I do have a real ID. I can't remember when I got it. I guess the last time that I had to replace my driver's license in Maryland.
For travelers who don't have one yet, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem says you'll still be able to fly for now.
Folks will come through the line and will issue their ID and show it. If it's not compliant, they may be diverted to a different line, have an extra step, but people will be allowed to fly.
Other acceptable TSA-approved IDs include U.S. passports, military IDs, DHS trusted traveler cards like Global Entry, and acceptable photo IDs issued by a federally recognized tribal nation or Indian tribe, just to name a few. This change is part of the Real ID Act of 2005, born out of the 9/11 Commission's push for stronger ID standards. If you don't have a real ID, you can still get one at the DMV. You'll need documents proving your legal name, social security number, address, and legal presence. Individual states may have additional requirements. Reporting from the city of Los Angeles, Christina Corona, NTD News.
Pakistan threatens to respond after an Indian airstrike kills 26 people in Pakistan. India says it showed considerable restraint in the selection of targets, adding that no Pakistani military installations had been hit. It's the worst clash in more than 2 decades between the nuclear-armed neighbors. NTD's international correspondent Malcolm Hudson has more.
Pakistan said India had ignited an inferno in the region after India struck Pakistan with missiles, killing a reported 26 people. Pakistan said it would respond to avenge the loss of innocent Pakistani lives.
Pakistan reserves the right and will respond to this aggression at a time, place and means of our own choice.
India said the airstrikes were a direct response to an attack last month by a gunman who killed 26 Indian tourists in Indian-controlled Kashmir. India said it struck 9 terrorist infrastructure sites, 4 in Punjab and 5 in Pakistani-controlled Kashmir, saying the strikes were precise.
With the aim of breaking the morale of militants, this action was restricted to just their camps and infrastructure. I bow before the valor of our armed forces once again.
India said Pakistani civilian populations were not affected at all, that India killed only those who killed innocent Indians. But Pakistan's National Security Committee said the terrorist camps were a false and imaginary pretext. It claimed that civilian infrastructure, including mosques, had been deliberately targeted. A statement from the Pakistani Prime Minister's office said 5 Indian fighter jets and drones had been shot down in retaliation. India has so far not confirmed the loss of any aircraft. Reports and photographs have emerged of aircraft wreckage near 3 villages in India-controlled Kashmir. The airstrikes were followed by an artillery exchange. Pakistan said this exchange killed 5 people in Pakistan-controlled Kashmir. India said at least 7 civilians were killed in India-controlled Kashmir. Both countries are nuclear powers, and the prospect of a full-scale war in the region has led to concerns from world leaders. China said it found India's military operation regrettable and urged restraint on both sides. Beijing is the largest foreign investor in Pakistan. China has also had multiple border disputes with India, which have on occasion led to military clashes. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer said the conflict is concerning for many in Britain.
We are engaging urgently with both countries, as well as other international partners, encouraging dialogue, de-escalation and the protection of civilians.
The European Union's High Representative Kaja Kallas said the conflict is very concerning.
It is clear that this war is not good for anybody, so we are trying to, mediate and bring the tensions down.
President Trump says he wants to see the 2 nations work out the conflict.
I want to see them stop, and hopefully they can stop now. They've gone tit for tat. So hopefully they can stop now, but I know both. We get along with both countries very well, good relationships with both, and I want to see it stop. And if I can do anything to help, I will be there.
India controls the majority of Kashmir, but Pakistan controls the northern and western areas. China controls territory in the east, some of which was ceded by Pakistan. Malcolm Hudson, NTD News.
Israeli forces have been operating against terrorist groups in multiple countries and territories, including the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. Israel has also been trying to protect the Druze community, as Syria is now calling for the minority group to give up their weapons. NTD's Jason Perry has the story and a warning. This report includes content that some viewers may find disturbing.
Residents in the Gaza Strip were seen scrambling as they tried to save people who were injured in a reported Israeli airstrike on Wednesday. A woman leaving the area while holding a baby explained what happened.
While we were at the hall of the restaurant, Israel did a strike and everyone died. The youth died. Youth at the entrance of the hall. Blood was like a lake. Oh my, pools of blood.
On Tuesday, Israel's chief of the general staff told commanders in the Israel Defense Forces that they are now moving into phase 2 of the plan to bring the hostages home and defeat Hamas. And in the West Bank, Israel says their operations are dismantling organized terror infrastructure, including dozens of residences that were used for making explosives and storing weapons. Israeli forces said they've now killed over 100 terrorists and detained over 320 wanted individuals since the start of their latest operations in the West Bank. And Israel says that after careful consideration, they've decided to dismantle some residences in order to prevent terrorism from reestablishing itself in the northern West Bank. Residents were seen leaving their homes on Wednesday after the Israeli army issued demolition orders. A local resident shared her thoughts.
Let them demolish half of the house and give me the other half. I would rather live in a room than in a castle outside the refugee camp. This camp is our life.
Israel has also recently launched airstrikes in Syria as they try to protect the Druze community from sectarian violence in the country committed by members of Syria's security forces. Syria's security forces are led by a former al-Qaeda affiliate, and they're accused of killing hundreds of civilians in Syria's coastal region in March. And now Syria's new government has been calling on the Druze community to hand over their weapons. But comments from one Druze resident suggest they're not ready to give up their weapons anytime soon.
People want to feel safe. They've had enough with more than 11 years of killing, strikes, worries, and instability. We thought, with the collapse of the regime, would leave us in a much better place. But until now, we don't feel reassured at all.
Israeli troops are currently deployed in southern Syria and say they're prepared to prevent hostile forces from entering Druze villages in Syria. Jason Perry, NTD News.
Communist leaders from China, Cuba, and Venezuela are in Moscow amid reported attacks from Ukraine. Kyiv is now targeting Moscow for a second consecutive day. The Kremlin has been asking for a ceasefire while the leaders are visiting. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pozdar has the latest.
Chinese leader Xi Jinping arriving in Moscow on Wednesday. That's to attend Russian celebrations this week, commemorating 80 years since the end of World War II. Venezuela's socialist leader Nicolas Maduro and the president of Cuba are in Russia as well. The Kremlin has requested a 3-day ceasefire for this week's celebrations. It's not clear whether that's to protect the communist leaders. Ukraine, meanwhile, reportedly continuing its attacks on Russia's capital for a second consecutive day. Moscow says it intercepted 14 drones early Wednesday.
The Kiev regime continues to demonstrate its essence, its inclination to terrorist actions.
While calling the attacks on Moscow acts of terrorism, Russia is reportedly continuing its attacks on Ukraine's capital city, Kiev. Ukrainian officials say at least 2 civilians are dead after attacks early Wednesday. The U.S., meanwhile, keeps working on a peace deal between the two sides. On Wednesday, Vice President J.D. Vance said Russia's demands for peace are too high.
Right now, the Russians are asking for a certain set of requirements, a certain set of concessions in order to end the conflict. We think they're asking for too much.
But he added that such demands are a standard practice during negotiations. Later on Wednesday, President Trump was asked about the comments made by his vice president.
We are getting to a point where some decisions are going to have to be made. I'm not happy about it.
And Ukraine envoy Keith Kellogg says Kiev is open to establishing a demilitarized zone along the current front line in case of a ceasefire.
What they basically said is, we'll back up 15 kilometers, you back up 15 kilometers to the Russians. So, I guess this 30-kilometer, 18-mile zone that you can actually observe. And you can actually say, okay, are there any intrusions?
He added that establishing such a zone along the front line would mean that the current land distribution stays the same for now. meaning Russian forces would control occupied Ukrainian territory. Trump administration officials have previously expressed doubt about Ukraine being able to get all its territory back, especially the Crimean Peninsula, which Russia annexed over 10 years ago. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
Black smoke rose from the chimney of the Sistine Chapel today, meaning that cardinals did not elect a new pope on the first day of the conclave. There is no clear front-runner to take over leadership of the Roman Catholic Church, and cardinals will continue voting tomorrow. They aren't permitted to have contact with the outside world until a new pope has been elected. Here's more on the centuries-old process and what we can expect.
133 voting-eligible cardinals from around the world are in Vatican City and will be under complete lockdown in the Sistine Chapel until a new pope has been chosen, a process that could take days or longer.
The conclave will begin on May 7th with one vote. After that, the cardinals will take 4 votes a day, 2 in the morning and 2 in the evening, Rome time, of course.
For centuries, cardinals have participated in the highly secretive conclave, which in Latin means with key. Its elaborate roots harken back to the Middle Ages. And to ensure the conclave's integrity in the digital age, security measures have been ramped up. According to Italian news broadcasters, signal jammers have been placed around the Sistine Chapel, and a Vatican spokesman says all mobile phone signals in the Vatican will be deactivated for the duration of the voting. The Vatican says the cardinals handed in their phones and electronic devices on Tuesday, and Vatican staff took the oath of secrecy. Everyone will be cut off from those outside the chapel walls.
It's a spiritual experience, and there's no chatting. It's with military precision.
Coming up, Attorney General Pam Bondi highlighting the latest results in the Operation Restore Justice child predator enforcement effort. Arlene Richards has the details from today's announcement. And as Republicans continue working out the details of their budget, Democrats are working to force Republicans to vote on a bill preventing cuts to Medicaid and SNAP benefits. Melina Weiskup with that update when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Attorney General Pam Bondi and FBI Director Kash Patel announced the arrest of 205 alleged child sex predators in Operation Restore Justice. NTD's Arlene Richards has more.
The Department of Justice on Wednesday announced the results of Operation Restore Justice, a coordinated enforcement effort to identify, track, and arrest child sex predators. Attorney General Pam Bondi laying out the results.
We are proud to announce the results of the FBI's Operation Restore Justice initiative. This historic, unprecedented nationwide operation led to the arrest of 205 child sex predators. Unbelievable. In just 5 days. This was an incredible operation done in conjunction with the FBI and our prosecutors. Children and their families now have a chance to heal. These are online predators. Think about this. 115 victims, children. In 5 days, we were able to help. This kind of work takes a toll on the FBI agents and the prosecutors who are doing this every single day. They are working tirelessly online, dealing with the dregs of our society, the worst of the worst, the people that hide behind a computer and target our young children every single day.
In addition to online predators, the operation arrested others around the country accused of various crimes against children, including transportation of minors and child sex trafficking. FBI Director Kash Patel giving a huge thanks to the men and women in law enforcement working on these cases. He gave examples of the predators who were arrested.
People in places of public trust have violated not only the law, but that public trust, to include teachers, law enforcement personnel, and other professionals that we look to safeguard our children have not only violated the law, but violated the trust. In Minneapolis, defendant Jeremy Francis Plonsky, a Minneapolis state trooper and former Army reservist, was arrested for producing child sexual abuse material while in uniform. Not anymore. In Norfolk, Virginia, defendant Jose Alexis Valdez Sosa, an illegal immigrant from Mexico, again, allegedly arrested for transporting a minor across state lines.
He said every child deserves to grow up free from fear and exploitation. All 55 FBI field offices, the Child Exploitation and Obscenity Section in the department's Criminal Division, and United States Attorney's offices around the country took part in the effort over a period of 5 days. In closing, Bondi said children are being taken advantage of, and we have to stop it.
But what I will tell you is these depraved human beings, if convicted, will face the maximum penalty in prison, some life. We will find you, we will arrest you, and we will charge you. If you are online targeting a child, you will not escape us. The FBI and the Department of Justice will come after you, and we will prosecute you.
Arlene Richards, NTD News.
On Capitol Hill, Democrats are ramping up pressure on Republicans who have vowed not to cut Medicaid or SNAP, which was formerly known as the food stamp program. NTD's Melina Weisskopf has the latest.
Democrats aim to force Republicans to go on the record on whether or not they support cuts to social safety net programs like Medicaid and food stamps. Their goal is to force Republicans to vote on a Democrat bill preventing all cuts to Medicaid or SNAP benefits. Now, how this works is that in Congress, if you're in the minority, it is almost impossible to get control over floor time. So Democrats are working on this through a discharge petition. This would require 218 signatures to force the Democrat bill onto the floor. That means a handful of Republican lawmakers would need to come on board if all Democrats are behind it. So far, this discharge petition has close to 100 signatures in support, all of them Democrats. Democrat leader Hakeem Jeffries yesterday spoke about the initiative.
The discharge petition is now live on the House floor. All we need are 4 Republicans to do the right thing, stand up for Medicaid and stand up for SNAP so they can stand up for the American people. And we can stop the devastating cuts that Republicans are proposing.
Leader Jeffries also dismissed a similar effort that was unveiled earlier this week by a group of vulnerable House Republicans. They unveiled a point of order resolution meant to prevent their own leadership from cutting Medicaid and food stamp benefits from the most vulnerable people, such as pregnant women or people with disabilities. But the Democrat leader says that if those Republicans were serious about preventing cuts to those programs, they would take the quicker route of joining his discharge petition. Back to you in the studio.
And on Capitol Hill today, a House hearing on anti-Semitism on college campuses. What's influencing the spread of anti-Semitism on college campuses and what can be done to stop it. Hear analysis and proposed solutions from Republican Congressman Bob Onder of Missouri, who serves on the House Education and Workforce Committee. Join us for NTD's Capitol Report with Steve Lance at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Coming up, high-stakes talks between Chinese and American trade officials this week. What can we expect from the meeting, and how might the results impact the global economy? China analyst John Pelson joins us to discuss. And the House approves a bill that would combat forced organ harvesting and put sanctions on violators. Human rights groups join the bill's author outside of the Capitol building today. Jason Blair reports after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. President Trump's top trade officials will meet with their Chinese counterparts this week to discuss a de-escalation of a trade war between Washington and Beijing. The trade talks will be the first in-person meetings between Chinese and American officials since the tit-for-tat tariff escalation kicked off in March. Amid these tensions, Trump today swore in former Senator David Perdue as ambassador to China. Joining us now to discuss these latest developments is China analyst John Pelson. He's the author of the book Wireless Wars, China's Dangerous Domination of 5G and How We're Fighting Back. John, thank you so much for joining us. Good to see you again. Now, China has changed its tune, now agreeing to meet with the U.S. to talk trade. Beijing's top trade official, He Lifeng, will meet with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent in Geneva on Saturday. How should we read China coming to the table? Are they feeling the pressure of the tariffs more than they're letting on?
Well, they're certainly feeling the pressure of the tariffs. I mean, this is really hitting China hard. It's hitting everyone hard. That's why countries engage in free trade. When you start to cut that off, it hurts everybody. And they've got some serious dependencies on the U.S., both in terms of what they want to be selling us, but also in terms of what they want to be purchasing from us, whether it's animal livestock feed and other ingredients like that, or electronics and chips.
And who would you say has the upper hand in these talks?
Well, you know, both sides are going to get hurt. So I don't know if there's an upper hand. I will say that China is far more dependent on trade than I think anyone else in the world. And the most telling sign of that is their significant dependency on food. To feed the country, they need massive imports, more than any country in the world. That's one of the things that's on the table, of course.
A big part of their economy is export-based. Now, Bessent is saying it'll be about de-escalation, but not yet a trade deal. What do you expect to see out of this meeting?
Well, not much as far as conclusions go, but once they sit down at the table, the key thing is that now there's an opportunity to reach an agreement without either side seeming to have caved in and lost face. Certainly for China, that's incredibly important. I'd say for President Trump, not losing face is equally important. So as long as they're at the table and in apparently an even-handed, equal way, they can come to an agreement and it won't be seen as a cave-in by either side necessarily.
And expanding on that, John, what kind of an impact do you see this meeting having, not just on the U.S. and Chinese economies, but also on the global economy?
Well, this is going to be more closely watched than the smoke coming out at the Vatican. Any indication that the trade wars are going to not even go away, just cool off, is going to be a huge boost to markets around the world, and it's going to be a relief to anyone involved in commerce, because this is such an important issue, and we're at a really a major standoff for a lot longer than people thought.
Now, ahead of this weekend's visit, President Trump today swearing in former Senator David Perdue as his ambassador to China. How do you see Perdue's appointment impacting U.S.-China relations in general?
Well, this is an interesting case because he's a very well-respected person, you know, in his role in the Senate and as a CEO of a variety of companies in his earlier career. As you know, he outsourced a lot of production for his companies to Asia, and a lot of that went to China. So he understands the reasons why companies engage in this kind of outsourcing. It makes great business sense. You know, if you're making Reeboks or something, there's no national security risk that someone's going to cut off your supply. If you're making pharmaceuticals, if you're making flat screen displays, it's a different matter altogether.
Now, to your point, President Trump saying Perdue brings, quote, a lifetime of experience at the highest levels of business and politics, adding, say hello to Xi when you're over there, please. What do you see Perdue bringing to this position, or what can we expect to see from him?
Well, I think China has a lot of respect for him. And one of the things that I think China respects about Trump is he's a businessman. And China, you know, as the saying goes, the business of China is business. So they appreciate, I think, in the transition from Biden to Trump, no one ever mistook Biden for being a commercially focused businessman. That's all Trump is. He's all about the deal and the transaction. And I think Perdue is in that mold, if not personally like Trump. That professional focus is certainly like it. That's going to be a help in how he's viewed and respected in China. And the fact that he sees the benefits of outsourcing to China, they're, I'm sure, hoping will mean that he's going to be pushing for more trade and opening up trade with China, lowering the barriers, especially on technology that we sell to China and on the technology they're trying to sell to us.
And back to one of your earlier points, of course, a lot of eyes on this weekend's meeting. What do you expect to see coming out of it?
Well, I don't think we're going to get any major announcements. We'll get some signals, and both sides will posture that the other side's backing down. Hopefully, the United States will not make any big shows of how we've stared down China and they're backing down and they're going to cave in. That's very counterproductive. You would think typically a negotiator would never want to say something like that. But there have been times where the message gets away and there's more spiking the ball long before that should be done. So I'm hopeful that despite not really getting any news out of this meeting, which is, I really think, the case, there'll be just good indications of progress, and it'll be weeks, maybe months before we really reach agreements.
A lot at stake here for sure. John Powelson, as always, thank you so much for joining us.
Good being here, Tiffany.
The U.S. House passed the Stop Forced Organ Harvesting Act by a vote of 406-1. The bill's author was joined by representatives from various human rights organizations representing victims of this crime. NTD correspondent Jason Blair reports.
The Stop Forced Organ Harvesting Act is, quote, to combat forced organ harvesting and trafficking in persons for purposes of the removal of organs. The bill's author, Representative Chris Smith, points to the Chinese Communist Party as the biggest violator of this crime.
I had one hearing where we actually had one of the doctors that did these horrific extractions. Again, they're not voluntary, they're absolutely coercive. And he said he couldn't believe it, after the fact, what he had done. He even said, I didn't give him enough anesthesia, and he started moving as I was removing his organs.
We need to stand together as Americans, as Canadians, as global citizens to combat the scourge that is the Chinese Communist Party. It is the world's largest transnational organized crime group.
Since 1999, millions of Falun Gong practitioners have been brutally persecuted, detained, imprisoned, and tortured for simply upholding their faith of truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance. Simultaneously, China's transplant industry has exploded in size.
According to numerous investigations, including an independent tribunal in London, Falun Gong practitioners and Uyghur Muslims are the two biggest targets of forced organ harvesting.
They are also harvesting our people's organs. Harvesting Uyghur Muslims' organs. And
these organs are marketed as halal to wealthy recipients in the Muslim majority countries.
The bill would make it a policy of the United States to combat international organ trafficking, promote voluntary organ donation systems, and to promote the security of human life in accordance to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It also says to hold people accountable, including members of the Chinese Communist Party who are involved with forced organ harvesting and trafficking.
We also have civil penalties of up to $250,000 and criminal penalties up to $1 million and imprisonment of not more than 20 years or both.
Rep. Smith says the sanctions for people involved also include denying visas and barring any economic participation in the United States. After the House, the bill next heads to the Senate for consideration. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
And this Friday, don't miss our special coverage of the annual World Falun Dafa Day Parade. Thousands will come together in New York City to celebrate the anniversary of the public introduction of Falun Dafa, a spiritual discipline for mind and body. It's a celebration of faith, freedom, and the strength of the human spirit in the face of persecution. That's this Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern, only on NTD News. Coming up in the NBA, the playoffs continue tonight, but the big question is, how long will Steph Curry be out? Dave Martin joins us to discuss when we return. And now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, plenty going on today, but let's start in the NBA as the Golden State Warriors will be without All-Star Steph Curry for at least a week with a hamstring strain. How much will that affect this series?
I mean, a fair amount, I would say. I mean, a 1 week, that means he's missing 3 games. Games 2, 3, and 4 would presumably come back then a week from tonight for Game 5. Should they be actually at that point. Now, fortunately for Golden State, they actually still got a win last night. Curry went out in the second quarter, just scoring 13 points in about 13 minutes there. Let's actually listen to what head coach Steve Kerr said after the game about it.
You know, he's obviously crushed, but, you know, the guys picked him up and played a great game, and obviously we're all, you know, concerned about Steph, but it's part of the game. You just guys get hurt and you move on. Our guys did a great job of moving on and getting a great win. You know, 48 hours after a Game 7 road win. It's an amazing group of guys. These guys they compete and they're together. We've been the best defense in the league since the Jimmy trade, and that's what's keeping us afloat right now. I didn't say anything. By the time we got into the halftime into the locker room, Steph was already in there with an ice bag on his hamstring, and the guys already knew, and we didn't say anything. I just told Gary he'd start for Steph, and we talked about the plan for the second half.
So yeah, it looks like Kerr's going to have Gary Payton start in his place. A very good defensive player Payton is. And he acknowledged there that they've been the best defensive team in the league since they got Jimmy Butler approximately 3 months ago. Of course, Curry, the best shooter in the history of the NBA. I'm guessing there's going to be some low-scoring games here without him. He's also a great passer, too. So very popular player, unfortunate for Golden State.
Definitely a lot at stake there. Tonight we have a pair of Game 2s as both favorites Boston and Oklahoma City each trail 1-0 after losing Game 1 at home. Would you call these must-win games for them?
Yeah, actually I would. I mean, just like Cleveland already lost the first 2 at home there. And the reason, of course, it's so difficult, if you lose the first 2 at home, you've now got to win 4 of the next 5 games, and 3 of them are on the road. So we got the first game tonight between Cleveland and Indiana. That'll be at 7 o'clock Eastern time. And then you've got the second game later on, Boston against New York. Now the Celtics set an NBA playoff record that they'd rather not have by missing 45 three-pointers in Game 1, and they still made it to overtime there, but they blew that 20-point lead. Now, Kristaps Porzingis played only 13 minutes in Game 1. He's listed as day-to-day with an illness. We still have not heard about his conditions. That game is at that game is actually at 7 o'clock Eastern time. And the first game, meanwhile, of course, is Indiana versus I think I got that wrong. It's actually Oklahoma City versus Denver. I'm getting these games mixed up there, Tip.
Just
too many games going on. Oklahoma City versus Denver. Now, of course, Denver won Game 1 on that last-second three-pointer by Aaron Gordon. So that is Game 2 tonight in that series.
I already don't know how you keep track of all the names. So, shifting gears to the NFL, the Pittsburgh Steelers have traded wide receiver George Pickens to the Dallas Cowboys for a third-round pick. How does he fit into Dallas's plans?
Yeah, they really want like a number 2 receiver to kind of complement CeeDee Lamb. And I think he does it well. I mean, Pickens is more of an outside receiver. CeeDee Lamb more works in the slot. Plus, Pickens, he's still on his rookie contract. He's got 1 more year on that. So he could be playing for a bigger deal. Players typically have better seasons under those conditions. He's a very talented receiver. Now, he hasn't made a Pro Bowl yet. He's probably on the fence of almost being a Pro Bowl receiver, though. Averaged just under 1,000 yards as a season. Now, you could kind of see some kind of trade coming here for Pittsburgh because they just traded for DK Metcalf earlier this offseason. So it's almost like they're swapping out Pickens for Metcalf. While taking, I think they traded a second-round pick to get Metcalf and getting a third-round pick from Dallas for George Pickens here. So I think it'll be interesting now what Pittsburgh does next. Do they go after more receivers? They didn't select any more on the draft. Obviously, it looks like they're still looking to get Aaron Rodgers in. So we'll see what happens in that scenario. Of course, I've been following Rodgers for quite some time. Hopefully, we'll get an answer on that one soon.
A lot of eyes on that. Looking at NHL news, we have a pair of playoff games on today, including a Game 1 in Winnipeg.
Yeah, Jets host Dallas Stars tonight, Game 1 tonight at 9:30 Eastern. Now, the Jets beat the Blues in 7 games in round 1. This is actually the first time they've made it to the second round since 2021. That game is actually starting that's a later game. It starts at 9:30. We also have a Game 2 tonight between Florida and Toronto. The Maple Leafs took Game 1 5-4. That game starts at 7 p.m. Eastern time. So both road teams won last night in the NHL. I don't know what kind of epidemic is going on because, in the NBA, the road teams are now 5-0 in the second round, and they're having a lot of success in the NHL. So thanks for not asking me why that happens, Tip, because I do not have the answer. It's quite strange. The teams work the whole regular season to try to get the best record so they can have the home court advantage, and it dissipates in Game 1 here in all these series. So in any case, I have not figured that one out, but I would have come up with a guess had you actually asked me that, Tip, just for the record.
All right, for tomorrow then, the eternal mystery. Dave, as always.
Because sports matters, right?
It sure does. Dave, as always, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Tiff.
And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.